welcome back to the PowerHouse Fence Show. We are in the house, effectively in the house. A couple seconds late there on the buzzer, but we made it.
Yeah, we're back.
I'm Zach Shue, the other host. This is Dan Turbyville.
Hello, that's me. How's it going? Thanks for joining.
So tonight we don't have a guest, which is kind of an unusual.
Man, we've been on a roll.
Yeah, I know. It's been cool. Very cool.
This entire year, I think we've had a guest every episode.
Very cool. It seemed like that was our format, right? I mean, yeah. I guess it was.
We ran out of guests.
Or
just temporarily. We have a guest next week. So we just missed this week.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
I mean, maybe we're the guest.
That's what I'm saying. If Chuck Norris had a podcast and he didn't have a guest on, it's not because Chuck Norris ran out of guests. It's because guests ran out of Chuck Norris.
Good point. I see what you did. I followed you. Great there. So who's presenting this show?
Oh, this show tonight, we are presented by, of course, Memphis Fence Company, MFC Manufacturing.
Wow.
Simpalo, estimating software, and now Thornton Fence Consulting Group.
Yeah.
Round of applause to our sponsors.
Oh my goodness. So you can go to the fenceconsultinggroup.com/calendar to see all of Tony Thornton's events that he's got coming up. We just saw him speak last week.
Yeah, we did.
In what town? Groton,
Connecticut is where we were.
All right. Yeah. So we saw him. That was the first time you've seen him speak, right? He was a guest on our show.
But as far as attending a seminar or anything like that, that was the first time. Yeah.
Yeah. What'd you think?
Cool.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah.
So the topic was building an operations team, which I hope to be a part of I'm currently a part of an active part or contributing member to an operations team. So just kind of wanted to see how that all pans out.
Yeah.
And really, as it pertains to our ornamental division, sometimes I'm an operations team of one,
right?
Depending on the workflow that's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you volunteered that information during his presentation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
At which point he was not going to allow me to be the star student or a teacher's pet, however you want to look at that.
I thought you were going to get kicked out, actually.
Right. I know. Me. Call on me. Right. I know the answer. Right. You always know the answer.
Right.
He didn't say it like
it was nothing like that.
A villainous wizard, but.
Right. Yeah. So it was cool. So, he's all about efficiency and profitability, which ultimately I think everybody needs some efficiency and profitability.
And I think they go hand in hand. Efficiency, it does produce profitability in certain circumstances.
But if you don't bid the job right.
That's correct.
So that you got to know your numbers.
Know your numbers.
Yep. So anyways, he does have a super summit coming up in Utah. And that's here in the next couple of weeks, I think.
Right.
So if you go on his website, you can find out some information about that. There's
one last time. That website is fenceconsultinggroup.com.
That's it. So we're here. We're live.
We are live.
I'll put the phone number on there in case anybody wants to call in and say hello.
901-878-4987.
There we go.
Once again, 901-878-4987. Call us in. Come on. Give us a call.
Call me. Wasn't that some commercial around here for like a used car salesman or something? So as always, thank you, listeners. Thank you for being here. Thank you for tuning in. Thanks for being a part of this. We do it for you. Hopefully you enjoy it. And if you want to see some guests or hear us talk about any specific subjects, feel free to reach out and let us know. Yeah. Stories. So we went to the AFA Northeast Regional Trade Show and we recorded a little bit there. So we'll get that content out here in the next couple of weeks, maybe. But
you'll get to see my feet.
What?
That's pretty exciting.
If Ilaria allows it in the montage.
She's gonna put the little black square over your feet.
Right, just blurred out.
Yeah.
It's like a black square in the ocean.
I'll put a Venmo, and if people want to see
Oh,
them,
nice. That's a whole new stream of revenue I
Yeah.
hadn't considered yet. Our new sponsor is now my feet.
Brought to you by Zach's Feet.
They're not ugly, by the way. I mean, you may be thinking some, some heathen troll monster thing, but that's not
like
the case.
Sasquatch feet.
No, not at all.
No. Cool. All right. So enough about that. But we'll talk about this a little bit more in the episode that we record, or the stuff we recorded there. But I was pretty impressed, man. It was crazy. I honestly thought there would be like 50 or 100 people there or something like that, and I think there was 700.
700.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. A ton of vendors had booths set up. I mean, they had dinner, band, classes for a couple days. We got to teach a class or present or whatever you want to call that. It was pretty neat. It was a good time, and we got to go see a submarine.
Went on a submarine, which I don't know if y'all have heard, but in one of the episodes we disclosed my walking through a fear of flying in enclosed spaces specifically. So I had to walk through, kind of grow through some of that and get on a submarine, which was not all that bad. I did get on and then get off, but I got right back on.
Yeah.
And managed to complete the tour. So
Zach's phrase is, "I'll be back, I promise."
That's my new catchphrase.
That's what you did on the plane too, right?
Exactly.
Oh yeah, that's
Vegas.
right. That's exactly right. So to Vegas, which was a previous trade show, for those who have not heard, I got on the plane to Vegas. I didn't really think ahead of what was going to happen. Sat down in my seat and started to panic, just for being in a small, enclosed area and the prospect of having to be there for, several hours. And so I looked at Dan, panicked, and said, "I'll be right back, I promise."
Yeah.
Or something like that.
And then
ran
just got
off
up
the plane.
and like plowed over everybody between him and the exit and ran out the plane. And I was just like, "Oh, well, maybe I'm going to Vegas by myself. I don't know."
The gate attendant was like, Sir, you can't just get off the plane like that." It's like, you don't understand. I have to do this.
Go ahead.
It's like a movie.
Yes, it was much. Oh, that's how I thought it was,
It was. I wish I had a video of it. It was pretty cool. So we got our UL 325 book in the mail today. So that's pretty exciting.
That is exciting.
It's interesting to hold the book after having purchased it, and you're kind of like, "Well, that's it. That's all we get."
Yeah, it's rather a costly book, and it's kind of just a unassuming. It looks, like a college thesis or something.
Right.
It's just a few pages, 8.5 by 11. That's spiral bound with a, opaque plastic cover, and that's about it.
Yep. Full of that golden information that you got to have.
That's right.
So we're still on the journey to hire an estimator and project manager.
We planned to have hired by now.
We did. We in fact said we were going to have hired, and we haven't, unfortunately. So we're still walking through that path.
I guess if we were to hold ourselves to it, we could have just hired
someone. Been like, "Oh, we told you we were going to hire someone." Yeah, but we didn't. We're looking for the right person. So.
I think I just tried out a new laugh. That was not. I don't know how to do it again. There it was.
Oh, I need to show you the video of Webb. So we got a gym at the house. We got a tonal.
Yeah,
had it installed this week.
Cool.
And so we've worked out a couple times on it, and
it's like a LED or LCD display.
Yeah.
Television that's interactive. Is that?
Yeah. So It has like a, I don't know, 20-inch touch screen or something like that built in it. And so you go and you pick the workouts that you want to do. And it's like, there's a trainer on there doing the workout, like showing you proper form and kind of going through the whole thing with you. So, but it's cool. So the funny part of this, or the part that I thought was funny, is they have first of all, I can tell you the dude that installed it was like the least personable person I've ever met. It was pretty funny. I was like, "So how many of these do you install?" He goes, "A lot." And that's it. Like nothing else. I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." But anyways, so he there's family workouts on this thing.
Oh, cool.
And so last night, Webb, my son, he wanted to do one. So him and Alyssa were doing that, and I took a video of him. I meant to show it to you, but it reminded
cool.
me because his breathing is so crazy. He almost as he's doing all this crazy stuff, he hyperventilates, and I was like, man, is he super out of shape? I mean, that's kind of weird for a kid that runs around all the time. But then when he stops, he just kind of breathes, a little bit heavy. But when he's doing stuff, he's some crazy breathing thing.
I think he's embellishing, this is workout breath or something.
Maybe, I don't know, but it's pretty weird.
Telling that story is kind of reminiscent of when we got a Wii. It was
yeah.
I mean, this is obviously not a Wii. It's not a video game, but that same kind of it's family interaction, and you're all sharing in the thing, moving together, and all that.
Right.
So that's pretty cool.
Yep, it's pretty neat. It was fun to see him try to follow along through the workout there. So
cool.
You got any stories? Are we ready to get
I think
serious?
That's it. I'd like to get into the show. I guess right now we're going to introduce the Italian word of the week with Ilaria Pisoni.
What is the Italian word of the week?
The Italian word of the week is presence.
Presence.
Go
ahead.
Okay. Presenza.
Slay.
Presenza.
Good. It was good.
The R's are hard. I can't roll the R's. I never could. I took Spanish for 4 years in high school and college and stuff. Never could roll the R's. So that's always been a challenging thing for me. But anyways,
so we have entered or encountered this concept, the power of presence, which I think
it's really deep. It's a simple phrase, but I think if you really think about it and kind of spend some time going through it, it's the deeper the more you think, the deeper it gets.
Well, that's where I stopped.
Yeah.
The power of presence. I just went with it internally.
Right.
So we went to this trade show, as we mentioned. We did not get a booth. Typically we are vendors and we're set up with a booth, and that's how we interact and do our networking, is by having a booth and being available to the attendees in that fashion. So we tried something new. Part of this was we both were interested, I think both equally interested in doing some of the education, making use of some of the education resources. We had Nick Reich of the AFA, who's the head of the education for the AFA, on the show a while back, and that kind of got me into what are some of these classes that are going on about. And this was a little bit smaller trade show, so we thought, why don't we forego having a booth and just walk around?
Yeah, so we didn't really know what it was about either. Like I said, I thought maybe 50 or 100 people there. I didn't realize it was going to be what it was. So, and kind of just to go and be a attendee, it has some appeal to it. We're a pretty small team of people, and when we go and set up as exhibitors, and you do that several times in a year, it kind of gets tiring. So,
yeah, two different things. Make use of the education, also kind of relax a little bit and not have the bulky booth to set up and tear down and do that.
Right.
So part of that, and what we came back with, is we were able to network maybe equally or in the same fashion that we would have if we had the booth, or maybe not to the same capacity, obviously, because the audience was a bit smaller, but that the networking still was equally not equally beneficial, but still works.
It was still beneficial.
It works, right?
And so I came back and I started getting calls earlier this week for Sim Paulo was getting calls, and it was like, hey, you were at that show in Groton the other day, right? And I was like, yeah, I was there. And so after, 2 or 3 of those phone calls, it kind of got me thinking. I was like, wow, isn't that weird? We were just there. These are people we didn't even interact with, really. They saw us. I spoke for, I don't know, 60 seconds or something like that in a presentation that Justin Judy did on technology.
Right.
And so I think one of the people had seen us in there, and it was just kind of weird. And I just really started thinking about just the power of presence, right? So just the fact that we were there was generating leads, and we didn't honestly, I don't feel like we like put forth a ton of effort to do any like crazy networking and didn't run around trying to give everybody a card or anything like that. We just kind of mingled.
Right.
And
mingled. And I'd like to take this a little deeper than just being there,
okay.
but the actively participating part, because there's a difference between sitting in a chair and then being present, right?
Yeah.
The ability to recount or, recall some of the information from Tony's talk and some from Justin Judy and Matt Warner, that is as a result of not just sitting in the chair, but being present. So
Right.
in the sense that we were wearing our uniforms and had our gear on, that is a big marketing tool for us. It matches the backdrop, which if you're listening, it's just crazy, covered with all the logos. Some people have called them bowling shirts, pit crews, race teams. What are the other fishing? So they're just loud. They're all over print and they're loud, and people have started to recognize that. So that's one part. I mean, so we're walking billboards, so we're present, we're physically present, but then the presence of mind to interact with, because I can't recount the amount of times that I have just missed opportunities of shaking people's hands and introducing myself to people just because I was not present.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Right. So another level of presence other than just physical.
Right.
Right. So as I said, the phrase can get super deep.
Right.
So,
and part of that, I purposed myself. I didn't succeed in this. I'll go ahead and out myself, but I purposed myself. The trade show was small. I thought I'm going to go to every single booth and shake the hand of at least one of the people exhibiting in the booth. And I talked to a person standing at every single booth.
Yeah. Did you?
Yeah,
you
definitely did that. Wow. Shaking the hand of a person. Now, that may have been people visiting the booth, but it was important to me to engage in that way, to just talk to anybody who's standing there, right? As I'm walking around.
Right. Well, that's pretty cool. I didn't realize that you did that.
I did. Yeah. I did. So that was something that I just thought, you know what? I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to talk to every person. If they sell me and I don't want to be sold, I just let them know that, hey, wait, I appreciate that. I'm not trying to be sold currently. Right. Just wanted to come meet you and say, hey.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's cool. And I mean, that's what we were there for, right?
Right.
The networking side of it more so than the exhibiting side of it. So, but yeah. So, I thought about this phrase, the power of presence. And it's like, it just kind of popped into my head. And then later I went and put it in Google and realized, oh, this is like a thing. There's books there's books out there called The Power of Presence and stuff like that. So I did not invent it, but it did just pop in my head. That happened to me once before. So can I tell a story?
Yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah. Yeah. So I went snow goose hunting. Right. And I don't know, in Arkansas, they have like a conservation season that happens after the regular season, and there's like no limit. It's like a free for all kind of thing almost. And so the snow geese are like a nuisance for farmers in Arkansas. They go over there and destroy their fields and all of that stuff, and they're really overpopulated. There's tons of them. So, anyways, I went over there and I was like, what would be super cool would be if I had this like mirror that I could hold up and walk behind it and then like just reflect the ground. And so this group of 50,000 snow geese wouldn't see me because it's really hard to sneak up on them. And that's kind of what you do, or what we did anyways. And so I started working on it. Like I bought a piece of Lexan, got some mirror tint, covered it, did all of this stuff. And I was telling another guy about it. And he's like, yeah, those exist. You can buy them for like $60. And so once again, I thought I invented something then. And I was very excited about it.
Good ideas are universally good ideas.
Yeah.
That's just how that is.
Yeah.
I've used little more whimsical words sometimes, or mystical words like universal truth. And I think this power of presence is probably along the lines of one of those,
So I think, I don't know. I kind of thought about, I've put some thought into this leading up to this show. And I thought, have I underestimated the power of presence, or have I just never really sat and thought it through? It's definitely one of those two things, right? And so I think that's one of the reasons why this has been like impactful for me, is maybe because I either realized the power of it, or I kind of just like sat and thought the thing through a little bit more than I ever had in the past. And so it kind of, I don't know. It's been kind of interesting how it just like smacked me instead of just being something you hear and you're like, oh, okay.
Right.
You ever had those things where it took you like 3 or 4 times of hearing something
Most
until it finally
definitely.
just like clicked with you? I think that's what this was.
Most definitely. So we talked a bit at our topic of conversation for our presentation, if you will,
Mhm.
was bidding to a general
The
contractors.
general contractor.
Well, that was the title, but what we talked
Right.
about was bidding to general contractors. I'm not a man of contractors, and one of the questions was proposed of us, how do you sell to them? Not
Mhm.
just the process of compiling the is once you submit, like how do you sell? Because we're not actively and take them out to lunch necessarily. We're selling through an email, and basically we're just a number value, right?
Well,
So my point to that was, well, to answer your question honestly, sir, we're a Memphis Fence Company. We've been in business for 50 years. Blue everywhere.
blue is cool.
A brand.
Yep.
It's been has been branded chain link fence
Yeah.
or
So
whatever.
kind of to revert back to the shirt. To trade shows, the back of our trade show booth is vinyl wrapped. All of our trucks are vinyl wrapped, and all of them look the same.
Right.
Right. They all have this like crazy pattern and have logos all over them and all kind of like the all over print or whatever. And so, I mean, I personally really grown into that like kind of thing and all as where, I mean, you always hear about it, but I never really thought it was as big of a deal as I have become to believe. So,
Right.
but anyway,
Some
sorry.
of our other local fence companies, not to bash them or anything, but they do have a bit smaller of a logo. It's like on the door of the truck.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, a lot of people do that, like just get little magnets or something like that. Um, Me, I like the wraps. You don't have to do a full wrap either. A lot of our trucks, they're white trucks, and we just have a partial wrap on them.
Right.
And so I think it's, like $1,300 to do a partial wrap that gets this crazy loud printed thing on there with big logos and all that stuff.
So that's where we start, right? We start with the big wraps, the big trucks that are all matching in color. The sales
Yeah.
trucks, our pickup trucks, our sales trucks match the install trucks.
Mhm.
All the trucks are now, we had a couple of kind of rogue
Yeah.
randoms for a little bit. Now we're all
Well, so we do have like 16 or 18 vehicles. And so like a lot of them are full wraps, which are more in the like, $4,000 range,
Right.
3,500. And so I mean, I'm not gonna go out and do 16 or
Right,
18
that's
at
right.
one time, So yeah, there was some rogue ones. We just wrapped one that was like burgundy.
Right.
Right. It was like the weirdest thing. We have all of these other trucks that we had pretty well gotten them pretty consistent, and we had this one, and it just stood out like crazy. But
Well, and
anyway,
these are things that we've been working on really this year to get, or the past couple years to
Yeah.
get all the wraps. So it's all fluid and
yeah, maybe like 3
everything
years.
matches. We in the office have implemented the Memphis Fence blue color as a requirement for office workers
Yep.
and really starting to push for uniforms on our side. But that's just a piece of that. So another thing is not just what we look when you see us out in the street, but also like having done business with. Like I'm working with a customer that Randy, the vice president who manages the chain link division, said he's been doing work with these guys for 40 since he's worked here 40
Mhm.
years.
Yeah.
So I'm coming in shaking hands with the guy who's been doing it for 40 years, and he expects that same level of performance from
Oh, yeah.
me as a
Yeah.
representative of Memphis Fence Company, which I'm not balking at. I just observing that's what
Ooh,
he's
so
come to respect, this level of service and excellence from us because of the relationship. Talk
so
about presence.
so that's like kind of what fence signs. A lot of people are
Sure.
like, man, I see your signs everywhere. But they're blue and they have the same logos, and so everything's
Or I
tied
went
together.
out to my fence and your fence sign's still
Right.
on there.
Right.
I went to go see who had built my fence and your number's on there.
Right.
So I called you.
So what you were saying kind of made me think about like chain restaurants, right? And so the reason chain restaurants are successful is because if you've been in let's say a Starbucks, right? If you've gone in Starbucks, you know what to expect when you go in Starbucks. no matter where it is in the country, if you go to a mom and pop local coffee shop, like it's kind of risky. You might get really good coffee, you might get good service, or you might not. And so I think, that's kind of the mentality of consumers too with these chain restaurants is like we know what to expect. They have standards, they have processes, and they look the same across the country, right? For the most part. So yeah, I think that whole like being able to provide the service that people expect of Memphis Fence Company is kind of like that,
Right.
on a more localized level, but same kind of principle, I think. So yeah, we've done jobs for people for a long time though, and we've hung a lot of fence signs. Wouldn't it be cool to know how many fence signs we've hung?
Yeah.
That would be interesting. So, um, historically, like when we anyone who's listened to the show before, we don't do residential, but historically, like we've kind of when we did residential, we kind of struggled to like track the sources of leads because a lot of people are just like, I don't know how I heard about you. Like I just know about you, because they've seen our trucks, they've seen our signs, they've seen us at the grocery store, like whatever the case may be. We've just been present.
My kids, when they were like, maybe how long ago was that? I don't almost 10 years ago now, I guess, close to 10 years ago. So they were 3 and 5, when I first started working for Memphis Fence Company, and they recognized the Memphis Fence Company logo and signs. And so driving around the city of Memphis, Dad, you built that fence. They thought I built everything that had a Memphis Fence Company tag on it.
Right.
But sure enough, even just as small kids, they recognized the blue sign with the fence logo on there and picked it out everywhere we went.
Yeah. So there's an example of the power of presence, right? So all of that is kind of our presence in our local market.
Well, and that's been our agenda with the podcast as well, outside of just Memphis Fence Company, in order to perpetuate our ability to do this and to further the reach of the podcast. That's part of wearing the crazy shirts. We're not just saying we're Memphis Fence when we're at these trade shows. We've talked about it. When we talked about going to Connecticut, do we go? Do we not go? Is it worth it? The expense? And we're like, we got to be everywhere.
Yeah, that's the goal. Be everywhere.
Right.
Because
like parsley.
Yeah, right. Garlic. Yeah. So I don't know if you missed that conversation, but we talked about that. And Ilaria says, everything around here has a ton of garlic in it, and you just call it Italian food. So that was pretty funny. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't get it.
No. Well,
because if they put a lot of garlic, it's fake.
Apparently in Italy, they don't use as much garlic as we want in Italian food here.
Okay,
Like garlic bread, not a thing. It's not Italian.
Isn't that weird? So like the things that we think of as staples of Italian food are not even actually Italian.
Right. It's more like, if you want to think more Italian, think hot dogs and French fries on a pizza. Now we're talking Italian.
Right. So another good example of kind of that whole presence, and kind of to get back to the question that was posed when we were speaking, is like contractors associations are a good example of being present.
Which I must be transparent, say we're not doing a lot of currently.
Yeah, we're not doing good at that.
Definitely something on the list.
Right.
We've been working really hard at some other things currently, but that seems like something we need to tackle soon.
Yep. We've been spending time, here and other places, and we're only have so many hours that we can commit to doing anything. I used to be really active in one of the two that are big in Memphis. I went through like all the officer positions and all of that stuff. So I was like president from, I think maybe like 16 to 18 or like somewhere around in there.
Cool.
But I really haven't been a whole lot. And so I can tell you that the being present, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to sell jobs there, right? It doesn't mean that like the dude that you've eaten with 3 times over the past 2 years is going to hire you every time. But what I believe is that it does at least guarantee you the opportunity to bid a job.
Sure.
Right. And so when they think, hey, I need a fence, I want them to think of Dan.
Right.
Right. Listeners, when you think I need some software to bid commercial jobs, I want you to think of us. Right. And so that's kind of the whole concept there as well is like just knowing them, right? And you're not walking in there like, hey, can I give you some brochures? Can I give you these business cards? Like, I mean, you don't have to be that person. Just be there, right?
With a
And
picture
talk
of
to
a fence
people.
on your shirt.
That's right. I mean, wear your logo in there and maybe sponsor an event every now and then or something like that. And like people are going to realize that you're connected to it and they're going to call you.
Right.
And the more involved you are in that kind of stuff, the more phone calls that you'll get as well. So I'm a big advocate for it. And like Zach said, we don't do a very good job at it ourselves anymore, but I've been there, I've experienced it, and I can tell you that it works. So really the best answer that we had, like that's a part of the answer to the question. Another part of the answer to the question is just like once you have a reputation, right? So in my mind, and I don't know this to be a fact, right? So I don't know if it's true or not, but in my mind, I think of like on bid day, general contractors are receiving bids.
Right.
Right. And so they've got 40 different trades that are working on one job. They get 4 bids on every one of them. They have 160 proposals sitting there. One thing I talk about a lot is put your proposal on one piece of paper, right? Don't send them 10 pages. They don't want all that junk.
Right. That goes back to like high school when we were learning to write resumes or whatever to put it on one page.
Right. So every once in a while, like, you know, you might need to include something or whatever, but like try to keep it on a piece of paper. So anyways, they have all of these proposals. In my mind, what's going to happen is they're going to weed out the people that they would not hire to do a certain part of that job. Right. So if they look at 4 different fence companies and they're going to weed out 1 or 2 of them because they've had bad experience, they don't know who they are, they don't trust them, whatever the case may be, like they may just take those and throw them in the trash can regardless. Say 3 people bid a job and it's all 50, 55, $60,000 and then they get somebody that comes in at 25. I bet I personally would pick up that $25,000 quote and throw it in the trash.
I talked to a general contractor and he told me that's exactly what he does.
Yep. I think there's some people out there that try to operate and do things that are kind of shady, but I mean, I think for the most part, that's what would happen, right? They would pick it up, throw it in the trash and say, no, something's wrong. They missed something, whatever it is.
Right.
Now, not to like go down this whole tangent, but if you send your proposal in early enough, you know, maybe not 30 minutes before bid, but maybe like, you know, the day before or something like that. A lot of people will say like, oh no, it just gives them an opportunity to shop your numbers and all. Well, yeah, sure. But it also gives them an opportunity to call you and be like, hey, you're missing something.
Yeah, right. I've had that call.
Yeah, me too.
Your number looks a little off. Are you sure you got everything in the proposal? And
yep. And so when you get it in a little early, like you'll get that kind of thing. But anyways, so yeah, I think they'll weed out people that they don't know or that they don't trust or whatever the case may be, had bad experience with. And so, you know, I think being a part of the group that doesn't get weeded out is going to play into that. So I tell people if you want to start bidding jobs, then start calling general contractors and talk to estimators. Right. And I think that would probably help you to be in that group that's not going to get thrown away.
Right.
Right. So now they at least know you. Like, oh, wait a minute. I've talked to that guy a couple of times. You know, I know who Jim is. Yeah, I'll keep their number. We'll use it. So, I mean, networking, right? And that's easy. Like you have a phone already. You can pick it up and call them.
So we've been really, both the two of us, delving into, I've used the term professional growth. I'm just going to continue to use that. It's really personal growth, but the personal growth that can transcend our home life and also improve our ability to do our jobs and be better leaders. And a lot of leadership. At first it was the introduction or just the idea of culture. We were both kind of fascinated simultaneously with improving culture. And then when you start to improve culture, as with most things, if you think there's a problem, it's very often that you're the place where you have to start to do the work. So in the culture venture, we recognize that as the leaders, it's our responsibility to exhibit the culture and that we can't point down. We have to focus on us and basically be the culture we want to see. So in response to that, we've both picked up some different audio books and have now kind of traded some back and forth. One of which obviously is the Toyota Way, which we mentioned, which there's a little talk about culture in there. There's some.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk about business and business structure and manufacturing practices and a bunch of stuff. And so I'm constantly seeking new audiobooks and resources to grow personally, but also obviously personally affects everywhere I'm at. This isn't something I do like in silence in my room and it stays there and I just go about my day and be the same, right? So,
and you don't like turn the switch off
right,
when you
no.
walk out the door at work and then turn it back on when you show up the next day,
Right.
right? So I mean, it's going to affect your entire life.
Right. So one of the ones that we've gotten onto, Dan sent this to me. I don't know how you found it. I don't know that that really matters, but it's called an episode of Founders is the title. And this guy's a podcaster who basically podcasts about founders and
Yeah.
their mentality, some of their behavior, stories from people who've worked with them. In the current episode that I'm listening to, Dan's listening to, I'm about 40 minutes into a 120-minute show, I think, or something like that. But this one is about Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant.
Right. So I don't really in the show he's mentioned that he's done like multiple episodes on them individually in the past, but this one is kind of like a combination thing. I don't fully understand. I agree. He's talking about leaders, right? So that I think that's kind of like his thing is talking about people that are leaders, superstars in their world, like whatever you
Right.
want
He
to say
mentioned
there.
Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
And so that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right. Which I can relate. I am a leader.
Right.
I am in the process of founding MFC, MFG, basically.
Right.
So
presence. Right. So you think about if you're on a team with Michael Jordan, I mean, what kind of confidence boost would that be every time you walked into an arena,
sure.
knowing that Michael Jordan was on your team and it didn't matter who's sitting on the other side, right? I mean, I would be like, I got this dude. Like, we're pretty good, right? So, I mean, that's just Kobe Bryant, same thing. Like, I mean, there's a list of people that would fit into that category, right? So it's not just one, but I mean, just being the whole team looks up to them in such a way that it just boosts morale and confidence for the entire team.
Man, I remember watching. It's funny. They talk about Kobe and he spent a lot of time watching Michael Jordan footage. And when I was Kobe's age, whatever, in the, we're probably about the same age. And so when I was a kid, I too was watching Michael Jordan and not really playing a lot of basketball, but I was equally inspired by his ability. It was like an inhuman ability. So to observe that he's really great at basketball and won a bunch of championships and that kind of stuff, and it really stylized basketball in a way that had not been done before, previous. And that's cool, but like that's kind of where I stopped, right? But I was mesmerized, and so now to be as an adult in the position I am, looking at him as this extreme leader and calling the people around him to rise to his level of performance and commitment and dedication, to see that that's what it took to get that is pretty cool. It's a whole nother, like you mentioned before, like it took me 25 years to be like, oh, that guy he didn't just jump off the shelf good at basketball. He has worked like a madman and oftentimes acted like a madman to get to that place.
Yeah, so I don't think he called other people to get on his level. I think he demanded that other people get on his level, right? And so, yeah, it's been pretty impressive to me just to listen to it and, hear there's a lot of stories in there.
Right.
And, a lot of bits from like different books and articles and interviews and all that kind of stuff. But man, it's pretty impressive. And so on the flip side of that presence concept with guys like Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant is what does that do to the other team?
Right.
Right. I mean, I feel like if I was on the other team, I'd be sitting there with my fingers crossed, like, please let them have the flu. Right. Please let them not walk out. And then they come out and you're just like, oh man. I mean, so there was a story in there. He walked into the opposing team's dressing room wearing a suit and tie, like the other team's all getting ready for the game and everything. He comes walking in his suit and tie, walks up to the dude that was like, playing his position on the other team, playing against him. And he walks up to him and he says, you better lace them tight. It's going to be a long night, and turns around and walks out the door.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like just getting in their head. And so that night he scored 60 points. And so he was correct. It was a long night for them. But I mean, just the presence on either way you want to look at that is pretty crazy.
And it's interesting continuity or connection here. We were talking about the power of presence prior to listening to this podcast on our return trip from Groton, Connecticut. We were talking about the power of presence, or as soon as we got back, or whatever, and then this podcast, and then there's a point where Michael's be asked about if they're going to win another. He tells them to enjoy the moment and to be present. So that was the thing for him, was to do the one thing you're good at and do only that. Back to being present. Not and so this is another facet of the word and presence, is to be in that, in what you're doing.
Right. So that was the night they had won the championship game.
Right.
And a reporter asked him, "Are you going to win again next year?" And he's like, "Man, don't do that. Like, don't ruin this moment. Just to live right here, right now." And so be present in this moment now. Don't think about what's happening next year. He's like, when we get to October or whatever, he said, we'll see where we're at. But
I think the quote was, "It's that Zen Buddhist shit."
Yeah, that's exactly right. It was something along those lines.
It's that Zen Buddhist shit. Yep. Just enjoy what's happening now. Mm-hmm. But the point also is that he played basketball, and that was when it was time for the season to start. The other, or owning the other sports team, not doing golf. He was just playing ball.
And so at one point, during the off season, he was practicing 3 times a day. Yeah. So he was like very regimented. Right. And I don't, maybe it's later on, but I think it was like during the off season or something like that. He was practicing 3 times a day. And so he would like practice in the morning, play golf, practice at lunchtime, eat lunch, and then practice again later or something like that. So
in the observance of elevating the culture of the ornamental shop, that's one thing I started to try to instill in them, was that something that I have, which is a love, not just a love for the craft, but a dedication, and appreciation for the craft. And that starts, I think, subconsciously. If you just run into the shop in the morning, you don't put an apron on, you don't get your tools set out for dry, and you just start working in a messy kitchen. It's how I try to relate that to them. So I ask them, I say, when it's like, if it's Thanksgiving dinner, or you got a date, or it's your mom's birthday or whatever, do you cook in a dirty kitchen? Then why would you just come in here in the morning, start fabricating on a shitty, messy table? Clear out your space, get into the zone, become present with your workspace and your craft. And that's something that I took away from, in addition to the dedication. So what the question that I proposed to myself is, what is my basketball? If that, if I'm good at, I am pretty talented. I'm an artist. I've made all kinds of mediums, painted and sculpted and made jewelry, and obviously metalwork. I've talked a good bit about that. And obviously I now found myself in a position of leadership. I'm a decent salesperson. So of all of these aptitudes that I'm responsible for here at Memphis Fence Company, which one is my basketball? So when it's game time, or the game, it's basketball season, which one do I focus on?
Yeah.
And I've not yet answered that satisfactorily for myself. It's kind of, scary. I don't want to, but I see this necessity to commit to something, to grow. I like where, Michael's thought and Kobe's thoughts are headed on that, and what the podcaster is illuminating in the Founder Series.
Yeah. So what's your basketball?
Yeah.
That's cool. Hello, Cannon. So
Tony Thornton said something about that.
Did he?
He did. He said something about, who was it? No, that's not Tony Thornton. But the question was, what's your superpower?
Yeah.
Do you remember the speaker who said that?
Wasn't that one of the like Monday with Matt things? The Matt Warner?
Yeah, that is it. Matt Warner. Okay, so I misquoted. But Matt Warner proposed, what's your
superpower? That's right.
And Dave Gatto talks about a salesman shouldn't be sweeping the floor. A salesman needs to be doing sales. It's the same thing. If you had a person that's not just hired to do this job, but they excel at that job, they elevate the rest of their team when they're in that position. That's what they do.
Right. Yeah. So if you have 3 salespeople and you have one that is working at this level that we're talking about, they're going to drag the other ones up there.
Sure.
Right. Or the other ones are going to try to keep up.
And they're all of a sudden that salesperson has an administrative assistant.
Right. Any of those things.
Or a new job.
Right. So that's pretty interesting, man. Like, if you do have a superstar, how do you
Right.
keep them engaged if they're running circles around the rest of the people?
Right.
Like, how do you got to like kind of tread through that with taking care of them? Because, inevitably we get this whole thing that happens of like, oh man, he got this and I didn't, or she got that and I didn't, kind of deal that happens too. So, like that's a interesting thought, I guess. But anyways, so here's a question that I had. So we've talked about like when Michael Jordan or Kobe or whatever, like the opposing team, what that did to them. What happens whenever you pull up to like a pre-bid meeting,
Right.
right? What happens to the opposing teams, if you will, when you pull up there? Anything, right? And how, if nothing happens, how do you get to the point where they're like, oh crap, right?
I'm gonna get out and bully them next time and see how that works.
Right. Just get
I'm
in their
gonna.
face and
I don't
be
know
like,
about you, but I'm gonna sell this fucking job.
right.
You're not selling this job because I'm selling this job.
Lace them up.
Right. That's right. I don't know about that. I don't think that's really the best practice there.
Look at the comment.
Cool.
Yeah.
I got family in the house.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. The whole bullying thing, like we talked about that earlier. I feel like it's a little bit kind of expected in like the sports world, but I don't know at a pre-bid meeting if I don't
But
think
right,
that would be
but-
appropriate, right? But I mean, still they show up like, do you have your name on the side of the truck? First of all, do they even know who it is that's pulling up? Right? Are you getting out wearing unmarked clothes, unmarked truck? Like they don't know who you are. Right. I mean, I like to think of when one of our trucks show up and it's like, bam, we're here.
Sure.
And then we get out of the truck and bam, we're here.
Right.
But what does it do to the other people? I don't know. Maybe some of them can comment and let us know.
Well, and I wouldn't say that all of this stuff is directly parallel to our experience in business, but the mindset, the determination, the podcast was subheaded Relentless. And that's what they're saying, this extreme determination to win and be the best at their craft, and that all others around them should also be trying to be the best of their craft or get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
There's no room for you on my team. And that in the culture presentation by Matt Warner at the Northeast Trade Show, that's something that he said.
Yeah, right.
He said he delivered that message to his team in one of their Monday morning meetings. But this was a lot more delicate, compassionate way of illustrating this, which I appreciate. It was, I'm going to love you, and I'm going to love you and my team and my company. And if you don't have that love, you can't reciprocate that love for me, then we don't have a room for you here.
Right.
And I feel that.
Leave.
Right. You don't have to use the F word or, intimidate anyone or embarrass anyone. And I think I'd like to implement that in our shop so soon. I'll let y'all know how that goes, what that looks like. But already in this past week, they're all in uniform all of a sudden, which they were all kind of like half-assed wearing pieces of their uniform. And I'm not sure what happened, what I said or how. And I didn't just remand them to step up their game. I just mentioned I think I went around and appraised people for being in uniform.
Yeah.
That's what I did.
Yeah.
I said, man, that uniform looks fucking good on you.
So I've heard Matt Warner talk about that in his Monday morning meetings. He goes around and like fist bumps everybody in there. And he said, as he's going around, he's looking at the presentation of every person in there. Right. Do you look like you just woke up 2 hours ago?
Sure.
Or are you like wide-eyed, bushy tail, ready to go, and you have some like company swag on? Right. He said, I want to see a company logo on your person somewhere every day. And I like that. And so one of the things we've talked about kind of along those lines is like implementing a uniform policy and just letting people know what we expect.
So a friend of mine, I've been talking about raising the culture also. And part of that morning meeting, high-fiving, scanning the room thing is doing a fit for duty examination, wherein I'm making eye contact with my guys, or, in the shop foreman would be doing this ideally, leading the meeting and making eye contact. And this isn't just to be like, oh, he's drunk, he can't work for me today. It's to check in with your people and know where they're at, so that if they need someone to talk to, they're already on your radar to say, oh, wow, he looks like he's having a rough day. Maybe I should check in with him and see what's going on.
Right.
They're not machines, right? And in order to get the maximum performance, or to call them to that level of maximum performance, I think we have to invest in them a little bit in that way.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I mean, we're trying,
right?
Like that's our objective for the past, I don't know, couple of years is trying to invest in people and, help people grow and all of these things within our organization. And I mean, outside of our organization.
And I think it's
some too.
starting to work. We got,
Yeah.
you made contact, or I think I first made contact with Seth, and Seth has now, initially, I was just extending some of my experience to him with running my small business, and then mentioning of the transition of doing that and then working here, and talked about the benefit that our relationship has had on me, you have had on me. And then in turn, he started calling you. And so it's
Right.
kind of transpired in that way. And I think that's what the opportunity that we have here.
Yeah.
Bigger than, or maybe outside the context or confines of a presentation at an AFA trade show.
Right.
Like it's more than that. It happens in the hallways and wherever. I mean, I talked to Seth in the lobby of the convention center in Nashville.
Right.
Just how it just happened. Right.
Yeah. I mean, you just bump into people and say, hey, what's up? No, there you go. No trying. You guys are doing it. Awesome. Thank you.
Cool.
So, what about when you walk into the office, right? Or your shop or whatever that place is that you walk into? So, as a leader, as a business owner, as the foreman, the crew leader, like whatever you are. Sorry.
I'm just laughing. I got something I want to say. I'm holding it back. It's coming though.
Okay. All right. So, like, you're that guy. You walk in. What does your presence do there?
Right.
Right.
So I have had varied traits. I got to say, I'm not always on top of my game, but there are some times that I am, and I demand a lot of other people. One of my employees to me said, "You're intense," is what he said, which I didn't really take offense to that. I didn't quite know if he was trying to nicely say I was an asshole.
Yeah.
But he did say I was intense. And when I'm working, man, especially in something that I know the way around, it's my shop. I work in here. It's specifically metal fabrication. I'm moving. And I'm just pointing. I used to give a disclaimer to our new hires and say, okay, so here's how it is. I don't dislike you, but in the process of the workday, the words like please, thank you, good job, those types of pleasantries are probably going to go by the wayside so that we can efficiently get the job done. So I may say, just grab that, bring it here.
Yeah.
Very
Down, say thank you. Right. And say good job.
sure.
And so as a leader, I think people need that. And it
Right.
is hard, right? And I mean, I struggle with that myself all the time. I don't know how many times have I ever told you good job, right? I told Ilaria good job today, right? I mean, I try to make it a point to do
Thank you.
that at
Yeah.
least every once in a while.
I would just going forward, it's okay with me if you only have 7, she can have 6. I'll take 1.
Right.
Then we're good to go.
So I mean, it is that's a challenge though, right? Just to be like present,
Right.
and
That's
to be
right.
conscious of needing to do that every once in a while. So I was going to tell. Did you want to say your thing before? I'm going to tell
That
the
was
story.
it. I was just thinking about being intense, and now that I mean,
So-
being such a force in the shop when I'm working.
We had a guy that worked here. You probably know him, but he worked here for a while, and I'm sorry. And he when he was leaving, I was like, well, hey, let's do an exit interview, right? Let me talk to you. Let me see kind of, what could be better here and all of those things. And what he told me was not too dissimilar from that. And he basically was like, complained about sometimes like I need the answer to the question. And I don't need like go find the answer or here's where you can find the answer or whatever. He's like, I want the answer. I'm like, well, I don't want to do that. Right. I want you to have the initiative to go find the answer and let me like steer you in that direction a little bit. But like, I need you to kind of like take the wheel and go do it. And so I don't know. I don't know if that's really related or not, but it reminded me of that. But
Right.
anyways, so I used to farm, right? I used to do some like hay and straw and had cows and all of this stuff. And so I don't know if these two things are related, right? Let me just throw that out there. I'm not necessarily saying that they are. But a few years ago, I sold all that crap. I stopped doing it. And I don't know I don't know what happened, but the profit margin of Memphis Fence Company substantially increased the following year.
Mm.
Right. And
Interesting.
so is my presence, did it affect that? And I'm not saying it did. I'm not trying to be like, look at me. But it was an interesting realization that I had, and I was like, wait a minute, what's different between this year and that year? Right. And I sat there and I looked and I tried to figure out some kind of pattern or something that was different. And it just kind of hit me like, wait a minute, you were here all the time. Right. And you weren't like, oh, I got to leave at 3 o'clock today to go bale some hay or whatever. Like it was, you're here all the time. So that was
I
a,
I can say there was a bit of murmur
oh,
during your
yeah.
farming days of Dan doesn't care about us.
Oh, yeah. Right. People didn't like that very much.
Right. Which negatively affected morale, which there in turn probably efficiency or performing the work thoroughly
Yeah.
or whatever.
I think all of the things.
Isn't that wild? And
Yeah.
that's just being here,
Right.
you know?
I don't, maybe people would disagree with me. I don't feel like I really neglected things when I was not here. Right. I mean, I would freaking talk to customers and I've bid jobs sitting in a tractor in a field. And I mean, so I was like doing the thing, but I think just the presence and just being here is, I believe, played a role in what made that difference. So just throwing that out there.
I like this next idea, so I'm going to introduce it to you guys. So
Yeah.
back on the presence, again, returning back to being present. So say during the completion of the construction job, we've talked about in the office and leading up to getting the job and bidding jobs. But so during you've sold the job, now you're on the job. This applies. I think this applies across the board to any sort of interaction where you're providing a service. But
Yeah.
so let's say we have a demonstration where one project manager is at meetings, communicative, and with that, I think answering the phone is a big deal. I'm a huge believer. I realize this is the digital age. People are cool with texting. People are cool with email. Early, actually, emails are probably kind of antiquated for some. A lot of people are working just off their phone, and emailing can be cumbersome on the phone. Even some of the older guys I work with are just texting and calling only. The emails are kind of like sent from my phone. Oops.
Right.
Sorry if it's misspelled, kind
Yeah.
of a thing. So one PM is present, one project manager is present at the meetings, communicative. Another is hard to get a hold of, does not respond, does not attend me. I think not attending a meeting, in my opinion, is completely unacceptable.
So, I mean, like, when we get close to installing fence, we'll start going to weekly meetings, right?
Right.
And so
Well, I don't think we need to be on site for the rough end of the plumbing. We've talked about that.
But I mean, like being on site for the, maybe 3 weeks leading up to when you start and then throughout the duration of you actively working on the job site, I think it's important.
The key here is presence, which is illustrated by communication.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what I'm thinking, if they're having meetings and I'm an active project manager on a job, I'm going to talk to whoever my point of contact is at the contractor's office and ask, do I need to go to this one?
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
If they want you, go. If you don't think it's useful, ask them. Say, man, is there really necessary for me to come look at the interior doors?
Right.
Or whatever the heck's going on.
Yep. And they'll tell you, oh no, there's no need for you to be here for that. Like
Right.
they're not just trying to, flex a muscle and get everybody there.
And so how do we navigate that? Being present.
Yeah.
Present.
And I think to go a little bit deeper into that whole like attending a meeting thing, if you walk in a meeting and there's 20 people there, like don't go sit in the back corner and as soon as they say we're done, just jump up and leave. Right. I mean, I think you need to walk to the head of the table and shake the hand of the superintendent and project manager and whoever else is sitting there and just introduce yourself.
Yeah, these are all things that I started to learn in welding school. I was not very active in conventional school, so to speak. And so when I got into welding school as an adult, I had a more serious attitude and I started to try to implement those things. And I sat in the front, I stayed, got there on time, tried to go to the bathroom before class, stayed through the whole class. And so that's where I really started to refine or commit. And I was not by any means a star student or maybe even employable when I started this journey.
Right.
And I think that's the importance, is that we are talking about this from two guys who we didn't just start this year reading these books and all of a sudden have all these characteristics that we're talking about. Not
Right.
and nor do I display them 100% of the time.
Oh yeah. We
Right?
don't always do the things that we talk about. I mean,
I
we're
don't think
still human.
I don't think it works like that, right? If you do, then okay, you won, I guess, you know. You can so
Seth says he makes sure to show up 30 minutes early to each meeting.
I like that.
Yeah.
I'm
too,
about 10. I like 10 and 5.
I shoot for like 15 because I like to give myself a little bit of extra time if there's some traffic on the way
Sure.
or like, especially if it's the first time I'm going somewhere, I don't really know where it is, things like that. So yeah, show up early. Yeah, there you go. Typically 10 to 15.
It
So-
seems like a no-brainer, but
Right.
so I had a lot of communication from upset customers of Memphis Fence Company in my years as an installer for lack of communication from the project manager.
Yep.
And so that really set me out like on a journey to communicate a lot, right? I wanted to communicate a lot. The specific complaint was unreturned phone calls.
Yep.
And that the phone calls were actually answered by way of email. And you and I think, are on the same page about that. We talk about this in the office a lot when someone's like, they're not responding to my email. Call them on the phone.
Right.
Call them on the phone.
Oh, I sent him an email 3 weeks ago and I haven't heard back. Well, I mean, pick up the phone and call. You
Right.
ever tried to do that? Like, come on. So you're talking like more in the residential world, right? You heard a ton of
Well, that was then, right?
Yeah.
So this is same thing though.
Right.
I mean,
No, it applies everywhere
Right.
for sure. So I just wanted to say, like, what we did in the residential world as time went on, and we like really put a lot of energy and effort into residential before we shut it down. In some effort to be like, hey, let's put forth effort into this thing and let's make sure that we gave it our best before we just pull the plug. Right. And so my instructions in the residential world and my goal and my wish was that a customer never had to pick up the phone and call us unless there was like some weird situation or whatever. But I want us to be the one that's communicating like, hey, I know you've been waiting 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever weeks. We have not forgot about you. We have you on the schedule. You're still 2 weeks out.
Right. So in the same fashion that we'll do a Monday hash out or Monday meeting, this is where I'm headed with this. I'm not currently doing these Monday morning meetings. We are actually, my team is having meetings every morning together without me.
Right.
But my intention is to institute a Monday morning. But what I do on Monday is I follow up with all of my open contracts and let them know where we're at, what we're doing, when they can expect us if they haven't seen us. If the posts are in and they're wondering where the panels are, I tell them what's going on with that. So every Monday, I'm reaching out to all of my current contracts and letting them know what's going on.
Yeah.
Whether it be through email by the time I've signed the contract with someone, I've come to kind of understand what method of communication works best.
Right.
So one customer I'm emailing, one guy I'm calling, and if he doesn't answer, I text. And then sometimes he'll text and say, call me, or sometimes he'll just text and with a thumbs up.
Right.
And that's, and this is a sizable contracting company, but that's just how he prefers to do it.
Yep. And that's cool. I mean, whatever people like, let's give them what they want.
Right. But I mean, by the time you've worked a proposal to the point of having sold the job, you can kind of have developed a relationship to at least know what type of communication is going to be best.
Right. So kind of along these same lines, I wanted to tell you something. Today I sent an email and I put in the email, I said, since you get a very limited amount of communication in an email, I want you to understand my tone. And I explained it to them in the email, like my tone that I was trying to convey in words, right? Because that's one thing in email and text message and all of that, it's really hard to get across.
Right.
And so I personally think there's a lot of times when a phone call is necessary.
I agree.
Now, in this situation, I sent an email to like 8 people at one time. So, I mean, I didn't want to be on the phone talking to all of them. But yeah, so I just spelled it out. I was like, hey, just so you know, this is my tone of voice, right? I'm not coming at you aggressively, or this is not a demand. I'm just passing along the information. Because I kind of like, a lot of times when I send an email, I'll sit there and kind of like read through it and try to put myself in the shoes of the recipient. And as I did that, I was like, man, this kind of could seem like I was being a jerk. And so, I just clarified it. So I don't know, for whatever that's worth, that might be something that you could do, be like, hey, I'm not mad at you. Or
Right.
ask AI, like, can you put this in a little bit more fun tone or something
Sure.
like that?
I suggested to Lynn, who works in the office as admin for commercial chain link division, that she was kind of apprehensive about sending a certain email that they may take it the wrong way. So this is what I do. I'll put in like smiley faces.
Yeah.
If it seems like that sentence was too direct, and I'll just be like smiley face.
Right.
So
Yeah.
whatever.
It's kind of hard. There's some percentages.
If you wonder why, if you're a grown man wondering why a grown man sent you a smiley face, it's just because I wanted the sentence not to sound like a jerk.
I wanted to be a little bit friendly
Right.
and didn't know how
Hey.
to use words well enough is what's going on. So,
yeah. So let's talk about, we're going to wrap this thing up here
Yep.
soon. We're running in pretty long, but I'd like to get into our last point of discussion, which is that what is presence not required for? We talked a bit about mental presence, but physically, we've been talking a lot about physical presence. So what is presence not required for? What is my physical presence not required in order to, or maybe this is the introduction to being present, is obsession is how it's been worded in a lot of the topics. I personally I don't like that word a lot. It has certain intimations with me that I just don't identify with, or would like not to identify with, I guess. So I was thinking dedication is another one. They use the word relentless in the podcast.
Relentless is good. I don't think dedication is strong enough.
Dedication is dedication.
I
mean, unwavering dedication. How about that?
Okay,
if you'd like me to throw you an adjective,
heavier.
But dedication means I'm dedicated. What does it mean?
No, it does.
It doesn't say dedicated but quitting.
Right. No, it does.
Dedicated with an undertone of quitting.
Dedication is dedication, but it doesn't seem as heavy as obsession
or
relentless.
Right. Do you know there was like an early 1900s definition of obsession that was something along the lines of having been possessed by an evil spirit. Which that doesn't really articulate what I think this means, right?
Yeah. Let's answer this question. What is your presence not
Welcome to Zach's Word Games 101.
We have a bit more, like we'll make another one about that. So y'all have something to look forward to. We're going to talk about relentless dedication.
I like that.
Yeah. And then we're going to touch a little bit more on the whole rise to my level concept. But me personally, I don't think there's anything your presence is not required for. Some level of presence, whether that be physical or not, I think your presence is required for everything that has to do with you.
Sure.
Right.
Well, we heard from Justin Judy that you can't multitask.
Right.
So presence, we're talking about presence. If you're multitasking, you're actually half-assed doing a bunch of things.
Right.
Like interchangeably, not simultaneously as one might think. You're stopping to do one while you're driving the car, listening to this podcast. I don't know about that, but driving the car, sending a text message. You're not driving and texting. You're driving and texting and driving and then texting and then texting and then driving and driving.
Right.
It's separate.
You're doing one or the other.
Right. That's right.
But even the listening thing, there's a lot of times where if you I'll realize, wait a minute, I don't know what they've said for the past 2 or 3 minutes because I'm trying to figure out what this person in front of me is about to do. Right. And so there's a time where you can kind of do both, but then one will drag you away from the other. Right. And you might get so caught up in the podcast, you're not even paying attention to what's going on in the road or vice versa.
Right. Determine the outcome, fixating on that thing and not accepting defeat.
Your basketball.
Right. That's right.
So, all right. Are we ready to wrap up?
I think good to close. We're going to unpack the relentless dedication. We'll call that as an alternate.
I'm putting that in here.
And get back into the rest of this personal growth, professional growth with Dan and Zach on the PowerHouse Fence Show.
That's right. That's right.
Thanks for everybody who checked in. I think my wife and daughter were listening. I guess last time my wife and daughter watched, my daughter was trying to wave at the screen to see if I could see her. So it's cool that they were able to comment. We got Seth in the house. Cannon stopped by, say what's up. So thanks everybody who is listening live or who has now tuned in after this is aired. And to whatever capacity you have supported PowerHouse, you're supporting us in our journey, and we really appreciate that.
Yep. And feel free to reach out to us.
Yeah.
Right, through social media or email or phone or whatever you want to do. Like, just reach out. We're around.
Part of that being present is I have one phone number.
Right.
So any phone number that you have, if it's for business or what, I'm open to taking calls as much as you are. So, and Dan has extended if you got my cell phone number, call it. I'm the same way.
If I'm not available, I'm not going to answer.
Right. That's where I'm at.
Right. If you call me at 10 o'clock at night and I'm awake, I'm probably going to answer the phone.
Right.
If I'm sleeping, I'm not, and it's not going to wake me up. My phone has never rang.
Maybe in the future on that ticker tape there, we'll put our personal phone numbers.
That number rings to my cell phone. The number that's ticking on there rings to my cell phone.
Right. There you go. So, well, thanks again. Thanks everybody for joining us. Thank you, man. Thanks for being for having the idea to do this podcast.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, man.
It would be freaking super boring for people to listen to me over here.
And again, obviously, we got the lovely Ilaria behind the camera, behind the scenes, our production manager, and Memphis Fence's marketing manager. So
thank you for pushing the buttons and doing the thing.
I try.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're doing it.
All right, everybody. Good night. I'm signing off. We're out of the house.
All right. Thanks. See you.